righty. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the City of Albany Traffic and Safety Commission for Tuesday, December 2nd. Please call the roll.
Harry Chomsky,
Present.
Ken McCloskey,
Present.
Peggy McQuaid,
Present.
Susan Reeves,
Present.
Barry Javandel.
Present. Next item is approval of the minutes for October 23rd. Anyone have any corrections or wish to make a motion to approve?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's number 5. It referred to, during the public comment, a discussion. I'm sorry, I don't remember what the item, but I don't think discussion's the right word. It was public comment. We didn't discuss it, so I think that word needs to be modified.
Okay.
And with that, I'll move approval.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none? Passes, thank you. Our next item is public comment for items not on tonight's agenda. So if anyone wishes to address us now, we have an opportunity to speak to the commission for up to 3 minutes on something not on tonight's agenda. Okay, seeing none of those. Our next item is presentation 5A, the police report. On.
Good evening. I hope you all had a good Thanksgiving. Welcome
Yes,
back.
thank
So our statistics for our October collisions, we had a total of 18 collisions, 7 non-injury collisions, 11 injury collisions. We had 3 hit and runs. 1 collision occurred on Marin, 1 occurred near a school. We had 3 auto pedestrian collisions and 2 bicycle collisions. We issued approximately 151 moving citations and made approximately 12 DUI arrests. And then just to let you know, next Friday night on the 12th, we're participating in the Avoid the 21 strike night, so we'll have additional officers out on Friday night doing DUI enforcement.
Great, any questions?
The one near the school, was it during school hours?
You know what, I can't recall, I'm sorry. If I remember correctly, I think it was in the later afternoon, but I'm not 100% sure.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right. Our next item, 6A, recommendation to City Council regarding updated traffic calming policy. Staff comments?
Yeah. At the last meeting, we prepared in review mode the changes that you recommended earlier in the year for the City of Albany traffic calming policy. And there was a request to bring the changes back to the commission in a final draft. So right now, this is what we have. The changes basically relate to the implementation of basically 3 categories of traffic, of thresholds for the speeds. And if the 85th percentile is 5 miles per hour over the speed limit, the block might be eligible for speed treatments, and then follow on step 3 below. There is also another category. If the 85th percentile speed is between 28 and 30, the block is maybe qualifies for soft treatments, which is striping. And if the 85th percentile speed is less than 28 miles per hour, no changes are implemented on the block. However, engineering judgment may supersede specific criteria in this policy. Also, another change was that once a resident requests the traffic calming or speed survey, the resident should secure approval of, should talk to the residents and secure support for the request. And we're using right now, because I have had a couple of requests, so we're using the same form that we use for the approval. Once the speed, the 85th percentile is confirmed that the block needs speed treatments. So we're using the same form, but we can change it later a little bit, so.
Okay, any questions from the commission?
Other than that, we don't have any other change.
All right. Questions? Comments from the public?
Good evening. I'm Ed Fields, a resident of Keynes Avenue. I didn't come for this item. I actually thought the other item came first. But since I'm here, I wanted to ask a question or two. I did not participate in the discussions or thought process for this, but I'm wondering if the speed 85th percentile, if you've made it harder to get hard, whatever you call it, hard measures of traffic calming, meaning that compared to what exists now, was there a change in that? No. So if there wasn't a change, then, I mean, I guess that's good. But it seems to me, as I understand that, if 80% of the cars are going kind of under 30 miles an hour on average on a 25-mile-an-hour street, you're not eligible for the traffic calming. And it seems to me that, having been to many of these meetings before when residents have requested traffic calming, that's a hard barrier. You know, if 85% of the people on your street on average are doing 29 miles an hour, that's pretty fast on our residential streets. So I guess that's my comment. I realize you're kind of looking at this as a final look, and you've already discussed it. But I think many other people would like to see our residential streets at 15 miles an hour. I certainly would. So I think this is difficult. I mean, I don't know if my street would qualify. And there are people who go down my street. One of them wakes me up at 4:30 in the morning on weekdays, going as fast as they can possibly go down the street, and presumably stopping at the stop sign. I'm going to get up one morning and actually watch and see if he does. So, I mean, he or she enters into that, you know, average, I guess. It still seems a pretty high barrier to basically say 85% on average, because I know you're averaging the whole thing up. On average, 85% of the people are going 30 miles an hour down a residential street. That's the barrier to get hard traffic calming. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Okay. Comments from the commission, discussion?
Well, Aleda, can you address the question of how this policy is different from the one that was in effect before?
Well, this is not really different from what was in effect in terms of the 85th percentile that requires a hardscape or a hard treatment. We added two more thresholds. Basically, if it's like between 28th and 29th, the block is eligible for soft treatments, which is striping, crosswalks, edge lines, and so forth. Also, cross hatches that actually could simulate bulb outs or chicanes. And that was not in place in the policy before. So we're adding more safety features here. The 85th percentile is the industry standard for determining speeding on a particular block. And also 25 miles per hour is the, per California Vehicle Code, is the speed limit on residential streets. Speeding is, we go what thresholds of 5 miles per hour over the speed limit. And, you know, that's basically how the speed limit is determined. So
compared to what was in place before, we're not changing the threshold for obtaining hard treatments. We're just making it possible that if you don't meet that threshold, you can obtain soft treatments and facilitate that process.
Yes, so it's more than what we had before.
And we're also clearly stating that staff can implement some of that, bringing it
Which
to
is
the commission, correctly?
Yeah, which
correct?
actually expedites the process. We
Right.
don't have to bring it before this body and approve it, and it's the staff will work with the community, with the residents of the block, and see what kind of treatments we have available.
Okay. I think as far as the 85th percentile, not that that's really the subject before us, as I'm sure we all have seen a number of these. Speed tends not to cluster in a 1 or 2 mile an hour range. It's sort of spread out. So if 85th percentile is 28 miles an hour, the average might still be below 25.
Below 25.
There always are exceptions. The person who's speeding down the street at 4 in the morning may be the top percentile, and of course, they're not going to be much affected by most of the things we can do, short of putting up a brick wall. So we're trying to obviously pursue traffic calming that will affect most people in the most effective manner to get the type of behavior we want. So that's part of the background on the 85th percentile concept. That 15% at the high end is hard to impact, but when their speeds get pretty high, then we have to go with harder traffic calming methods to influence them. Most people, the soft traffic calming or the visual friction types of things we can do on the road may actually be more effective. So, all right, with that, any other comments, or anyone want to make a motion to approve this, send it to the city council?
I'm happy to make the motion
Okay.
that this is complete and ready to be presented to the city council.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Seeing none opposed, that one passes unanimously. Thank you.
So this will go to the city council probably either their second meeting in January or their first meeting in February, depending on other things on the council agenda. But and they'll have the final approval authority for this.
Great. Thank you very much. Our next item, 6B, Canes and Adams Bicycle Facility Scope of Work. Staff comments on this one, please.
Okay, I'm sorry. Earlier this year, we submitted an application, 3 applications actually, to the Alameda County Transportation Authority for the, well, one was for the implementation of Canes and Adams as a bicycle facility, and also for the parking study for the city, and the Solano Avenue Complete Streets. 2 of the projects were granted a consultant, a technical assistance through Alameda County, and those are the parking study and the complete street, and the Canes and Adams bicycle facility. So we went through the process with Alameda County to hire a consultant for the parking study, and we reported on that previously, but right now it was for the benefit of both agencies. We requested to postpone the hiring of the consultant for the bicycle facility on Canes and Adams, and we are having an opportunity to take a look at the scope of work and comment on it, and it's been the wish of this commission to actually look at it and refine it. This opportunity also was given by Alameda County. Usually before we hire a consultant and make it final, we review it and refine the scope and send it back to Alameda County so they can issue the call for request for proposals, basically. So what I have here right now is, as a background, the Canes and Adams bicycle facility came about in the update to the bicycle master plan and the Albany pedestrian master plan. And at the time, the city council decided not to approve those 2 projects because more analysis was needed and also more alternatives studied. So the ATP was approved without those projects, and the environmental work was also conducted without those projects. So right now, after that approval, staff brought a couple of ideas to this commission as a way to educate the commission and also the residents of the blocks. The ATP proposed like a bicycle boulevard treatment on 2 corridors that are one-way, northbound and southbound. In order to do that, we needed to change the internal circulation to 2 ways instead of like having it one way, and implement partial barriers that will allow exit and entries on the blocks on only one direction, in the direction that the circulation patterns exist today. So there were some concerns by the residents and the council that this could not be safe, And the other idea that we brought is the implementation of contraflow bicycle lanes that was more accepted by the residents. And, but we have to really study the widths and if we have enough space to actually create a contraflow lane, how it will work, the system of signage at the intersection. And we would like to know also if there's another possibility for those blocks. So with that idea, we proposed this scope to Alameda County, and a lot of firms are very interested in working with us and with the residents on this project, as they're attracted to it because of it's innovative and it's different, and the scale is enough that they can actually create a good product. So with that, I would entertain some questions.
Any questions from the commission?
On attachment 2 on the budget, are the years right, or is this just a model and I shouldn't
No,
worry
this
about
is
it?
what I submitted early. I thought
Okay.
that I have to change these, but I didn't.
Okay.
What we think is going to be a year process, so I want to shift everything to 2015, 16, a little bit of 16, you know.
Okay.
So that's one change that we need to do.
Other questions?
So would this consulting project include a design for the Keynes and Marin intersection treatment?
We will coordinate with BKF because they're doing the intersection, and we will, what this design includes is 35%. It's a very conceptual level. And then with BKF, whatever they recommend, BKF will design as an 100% for the phase 3.
Okay.
All right. So I'd like to open this up for public comment and questions. Anyone interested, come on up.
Are you setting a time?
In no particular, I'm not organising my report or anything like that. Your report implies the residents know on earth's going on. There's maybe 2 or 3 people on the whole of Keynes, because we're very active, know what's going on. 1 or 2 people on the whole of Adams know what's going on. In other words, the residents of these impacted residential streets have not been communicated with. You're making these decisions, paternalistic as usual, and you have not involved the community that's impacted. We've mentioned every time we come here, there's no way in our residential high density, that means more kids, more pets, more people in general, to remove our stop signs. People who want to cycle fast should be tearing up and down San Pablo Avenue, not tearing up and down Adams and Keynes. I mean, it's insane to expect, and also if you have the stop signs removed for the bicycles, you're going to have the stop signs removed for the cars. And they already drive like idiots most of the time anyway. We need those stop signs. And you implying your notes for both streets, oh, we'll just do this, that, and the other, and just a yield sign. It's not going to work. It's dangerous. It's simply dangerous. As you, in your own report, have said, there are children en route to several schools and preschools in that area use our street every single day. And on the weekends, of course, that street is used when we head to the markets, what else we're up to. A lot of people walk and cycle. And we've got to have those stop signs remain. Nothing but the stop signs. If you want to do this craziness with having 2-way within a block, go for it. The rest of the world doesn't do that. Right now, bicycles go back and forth how they want. It's not a big deal. It'll be very crowded. We're only 30 feet across, but that doesn't bother us. I am questioning concerning how many parking spaces will we lose each block. It doesn't specify. I'm guessing 4 or 5, but it does not specify. In our crowded streets at this time of day, every single parking space is precious. So my question to you is, if we, in the residents of our crowded Keynes and Adams community, are losing our parking spaces and gaining the bike trail thing, which we don't necessarily have a problem with, then what are we going to get? Are we going to get preferential residential parking stickers? Are we going to get some kind of traffic calming, such as a bump, the speed bump things? We give, but what are we receiving? I don't see anything you're giving us. You're giving us danger, you're giving us inconsistency, and you're not giving us information, and you're not communicating with our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Ed Fields again, 600 block of Keynes. I wanted to speak to three issues. One is kind of a question, something Aleda just said, and it's written, I believe, in the application. And that has to do with the ATF proposal, which was to make the streets internally two-way with the half barriers and so on. And Aleda said that the entry and exit would be in one direction. And I guess I'm confused because the way I understand that, the entry would only be in one direction, but you could exit in both directions. So I just want to make sure maybe I'm not getting the same concept that's being described. So that's kind of a question, please, to clarify that. Secondly, this commission passed a resolution asking staff to prepare plans for the contraflow bike lane, not the, for lack of a better name, the internal two-way street bike route. And it's just kind of a question of process. I really don't object to this proposal. But there is kind of a question of process here. So I think that I have a hard time with consultants and the amount of money the city spends even when it's grant money, and the fact that it costs close to $500,000 to put some planters at the end of a few streets. Those things are mind-boggling to me, but I like the idea of studying very carefully those two different ideas and the pros and cons and all of the various design issues, the signage issues, the confusion issues. Because I'm confused sometimes, and I've been thinking about them a lot, especially today, and going back over the last two times that was discussed here. So I don't think that's a bad thing. But that leads me to the third point, which is following up on what Maureen said, that this question of this task one, this task entails conducting outreach in the community to form a design task force. And I really want to hold the commission and staff to that very literally, that we don't form a design task force and we don't come up with a tentative proposal. You know, it should be this way, not that way. Now let's see what the citizens on these blocks or adjacent blocks think about this. That we do the outreach and invite the members of those streets or adjacent streets or whatever to be on the task force, that we do some kind of public notice, because we have been saying this for a couple of years now, to please publicly notice the residents of the streets that this task force is going to happen and you can be part of it. The task force meetings should be public meetings. We've had other task forces meeting here recently that get a lot of work done, and if they want to take public input, they can. And that we do that at the very beginning. So thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, I think Ed said it all. I'm a little more optimistic. I appreciated the fact that the proposal referred in a very generic way to design considerations. It didn't lock anybody into a bicycle boulevard or a contraflow pathway. So I'm going to take take the report at its, or the proposal at its word, and we're starting with a blank slate. We're going to look at probably one or two proposals at least. The community outreach is a little vague, and as to what that entails. The direction with the former traffic study was that there should be a structured interaction with the residents of Keynes and Adams. So I assume that's what you mean by community outreach, but the devil's in the details. So I would be interested in knowing more what community outreach entails. The meeting definitely should be public. Televising would be great. But I'm cautiously optimistic.
Thank you. Our next speaker.
Hello, Commission. Thanks for considering this item and staff for bringing it forward. Is it okay if I unplug this and plug it in? So I'm speaking for strollers and rollers tonight, and we're really excited about this study. It's wonderful. There's two potential options now for two-way bicycle travel on these streets, and hopefully the consultants can think up other creative ideas. And my understanding of the agenda item is that you're receiving input on the scope of the study. And I think I've heard that the crossings of the cross streets are within scope, and there's a number of ways those can be handled. So if that's not the case, those should definitely be considered in the scope. And I also wanted to just provide some context for Adams, the Adams facility, some regional context for that. So what I've put up on the screen is obviously a map of the Central Bay Area. And you can see for the motoring infrastructure, there's kind of a hierarchy of facilities. There's freeways, highways, major streets like University. But for people who are biking, it looks like that, which is kind of a chaotic mess to some extent. You've got all sorts of different facilities going different ways, ending, starting. But through all this mess, the various cities have come together under the county's leadership to create a route. And you can see this called, down at the bottom here, you can see this called Alameda County Bicycle Route 5. This goes from central Richmond all the way down to the Oakland waterfront. And that connects a lot of these routes and pieces together. In fact, it connects routes that have been implemented in all the cities but Albany. So here you can see a zoom in on the portion of this route in Albany. And when you take the route away, you can see there's the bike lanes on Carlson up here. There's the Berkeley Bike Boulevard down here, which is on 8th Street and then jogs over to 9th Street. That goes all the way down into Emeryville and becomes the Doyle Greenway, and then on to Mandela Parkway. The piece that's missing is Adams. So without that piece, this whole long route that's been constructed by all the other cities doesn't work. So in terms of scoping comment, I would like to see perhaps a better figure than this in the final document that shows why Adams Street is so important to get two-way access on. And obviously, it's not just two-way access. There's also in the county, the plans for the counties on both sides as well as the cities, there's a element to put in a bridge here because that would be the final element that's needed. But once the Adams is two-way for bicycle travel, and that'll make it even more obvious that the bridge needs to go in. So, and I presume the scope involves talking to the California School for the Blind as well, because I believe the northernmost block of Adams is actually on their property. So, although I think that's two-way already, so maybe that's just not as much of an issue, but I think having a conversation with them would be useful, just kind of build up the relationship. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next speaker. Okay. Bring it back to the commission and any staff comments?
Well, it's been great, great comments actually and suggestions from the public and the residents. Definitely I'm taking my notes, and I will include in the scope and the community outreach maybe list possible organizations. As usual, we always include, whenever it's San Pablo Avenue, we had the School for the Blind as one of the stakeholders. So I think including a list of stakeholders that should be invited to the table, it's a great idea. And regarding there was a clarification about exit in one way and one out. I mean, that's basically how the ATP is proposing that. So we keep the one-way circulation at the intersections. That's basically the idea of the bicycle boulevard as proposed in the ATP. It's one way, like what you're doing right now. You have one way in, one way out. It's one-way circulation, so that's basically what you'll get. The only difference is that basically residents of the block will be able to go back and forth. I think that was the idea of just.
Right.
So is there any other clarification regarding the outreach? Regarding outreach is we're going to start working with the residents of the blocks from the very beginning. And the task force, my idea of a task force doesn't include 20 people, but maybe, as I said, some representatives from the block, but not a lot of people. I was envisioning something similar to what we did for the ATP task force. And we had about maybe 12 people and 2 representatives from the Traffic and Safety Commission, stakeholders, even neighboring cities. And in this case, it would be residents from the block. So we're going to work together in selecting who could be voicing the community's concerns.
Right. I think from to clarify that, the task force membership would be limited, but other members of the public are certainly invited and welcome to attend. Task force members kind of need to stick with the process all the way through. And we may have some potential candidates for that task force in the room now, I hope, because certainly there's folks who followed this very closely, and I think their input's valuable. A good way to start this, and I don't know if we want to specify the public outreach to get the public noticed, is maybe send a postcard to all residents on those streets, letting them know that we're beginning and inviting them to attend the meeting or participate in the task force, just to be sure that we clearly get the word out at the outset. After that, they can get on a mailing list or email list, whatever, to follow up. But the first contact, I think we definitely want to try to get in touch with each resident directly if we can. The entry-exit thing is definitely a good question. The more I look at this, I tend to lean towards the idea of I think a contraflow lane might work well. Again, subject to all the review and discussions, but ways that you can have the contraflow exit, if you will, be narrow enough only for bikes, may be less confusing. Because as soon as we say that residents can go either direction on the street, unless you've got an officer who knows who lives on the street, it becomes very difficult to enforce. So I think that's the subject we're going to have to take a close look at and see what's really feasible. It may be that it's one way for cars, but 2-way for bikes with clear markings.
No, that's basically what it was. Well, I don't know. It was based on some of Berkeley's blocks that you have, the partial barriers, basically.
Yeah, and the partial barriers are on wider streets in a lot of cases. And again, there's many models for how these things work, and it's context dependent. I think we've got a pretty clear context here and reasons why the streets are one way in the direction they are. That, again, this is something the task force needs to weigh in on, but hopefully we can have the consultant provide some good ideas of the pros and cons and work with the task force to see what everyone feels comfortable with that's really feasible and provides the benefit we're looking for. Other comments or feedback from commission members?
Well, a couple of people brought up questions about intersections. So let me expand on my earlier question, which is when I asked, is the Keynes and Marin intersection treatment part of the scope? Let me just ask if all the intersections, like Solano is a case where it might be difficult for bicycles to cross.
Maybe I should really specify, but the understanding is that the intersections will be part of it, because the Keynes and Adams is basically a full corridor that intersects with these other streets. So the treatments shouldn't stop at the intersections, but continue through the crossings.
Right. Okay, so, and the other question was about stop signs. Is there anything in the current proposal that suggests removing existing stop signs? Or-
Well, this is not a design, this is basically a scope of work.
Okay.
And then we're following, what I did is grab basically, copy and paste from the ATP.
So if there is a suggestion about removing stop signs, that would be something that would be up for discussion during the process?
Of course, and this is just the basis. It's just two planning documents that have happened, and one is the active transportation plan with the suggestions for a bicycle facility implementation on Keynes and Adams, a list of possible implementations, and that's something that is going to be available for the consulting firm. So they have to really analyze the whole situation.
Yeah, okay.
And the other one will be the complete street, what we brought up here, which is the contraflow lane. And maybe another one that they think of.
Well, that fits in the scope item of including the intersection controls at all intersections. I think that definitely should be addressed. As much as I'm not a fan of excessive use of stop signs, I think they make sense here. And you need all traffic, bikes and cars, to kind of treat them the same way. Otherwise, it becomes confusing. You don't know what to expect, especially for the contraflow direction. Again, this is something that the task force needs to work out with the consultants, and it should be part of the scope. Other thoughts?
So I don't think we've heard any suggestion that anything about the scope as it's written here should be changed. Is that correct? I mean, we've addressed some of these comments about what the outcome should be, but as far as the way the scope is presented here, it seems like it's fine.
Well, is the scope explicit about sending mailers out to people at the outset, or is that kind of assumed?
And actually, that's something we can actually include it.
Okay, I'd like it to be specific, because I
Yeah.
don't want us to kind of forget to do that. That would be very unfortunate.
Well, and I think, Fareed, this is sort of what you were saying, but even before the task force becomes official and people are assigned or elected or whatever, that there be at least one community meeting just to talk about the process and maybe not get into the details, but to talk about the process and what's possible or what's not possible. And maybe from that, people might decide, yes, I'd like to be on this task force, or, that's just really not for me. So to start out with some meetings before the task force.
Well,
Traffic
my
and
understanding
safety
of what Fareed was saying was to actually send a postcard to all the residents and invite them to a meeting, because at the meeting, we're going to decide who's going to be on the task force. And then we're going to talk about logistics for the process.
I think so. I agree with Peggy that that's kind of the intent, is get people invited. That meeting is for the purpose of discussing the process and identifying who might be interested in being on the task force, so that we can make those appointments or get those volunteers, however we're going to populate the task force. But yeah, to give people an opportunity to know what it is that they're volunteering for
Exactly.
before they sign up certainly makes sense.
And I think, too, that there needs to be some discussion, perhaps of this commission, perhaps on the staff level, of how the task force will be, I don't even know what the word is, appointed, selected, anointed, whatever. So that everybody understands how the task force comes to be. And I've been on several different task forces, and they've all been different. So I think there needs to be clear understanding into how one becomes a member of the task force for the public.
We could certainly do it the same way that members of commissions are appointed. Have people, submit their letter of interest or something of that sort, and then have the council members each appoint 2 task force members. If there's more interest than there are spaces. If we have 10 slots and 10 people say they're interested, I think we're done.
Right.
But
Good luck with that.
yeah.
I was thinking that whenever we present to this commission, that's going to be the public meeting, because we cannot, if I remember clearly how we did the ATP process, we didn't videotape, and not all the meetings were public because it was different stakeholders and 2 members of the Traffic and Safety Commission, which is not a quorum. But then we were reporting to the Traffic and Safety Commission at public meetings, and I think that's the way I was envisioning this process as well.
I think it's fine to have targeted meetings. The public should be welcome to all of them, even if it's not one that we have here. If we go meet at an intersection to talk about something specific, or meet with a particular group. But again, always open to everybody, even if it's not normal, public meeting process.
Well, yeah, it's open, but I've heard suggestions of being videotaped and things like that. We cannot do that.
We may not be able to do all of them, but when it comes to the commission for discussion, or there may be some more formal task force meetings. Again, that all depends on what our capacity is to videotape within staff
One thing
resources.
that I would like to add that I don't think is here, I don't remember, it's a walk-in audit. And that's what a lot of people from the community could actually, or the residents from the block could actually join us, like we did with the complete streets process.
Right. Okay. So maybe with something explicit about mailing invitations to the kickoff meeting to the residents of those blocks, that we are including all intersections if that's not already clear in the scope, that the kickoff meeting is before the task force is assigned.
And a walking audit?
Walking audit, sure. Yeah, that we want a walking audit to be part of the process.
I'm actually pretty impressed with the flow of this process, and it comes back to traffic and safety at least 3 times, and that's even in the 35% plans, and I understand that probably come back again after that. So it seems like a fairly open process to me.
All right, great. So really the only action is provide feedback. Do you want a motion from us, or just, you've got it? Okay, great. Well, thank you. All right, our next item then is announcements and communications. Any announcements?
Can I make a comment?
Certainly.
This is my last traffic and safety meeting. It's kind of sad. But I just wanted to say thank you to all the commissioners and Aleda and Jeff, that these last 2 years have been really interesting and hard work, but fun. And I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate all of you and being on this commission with you all. And hope you keep doing all the great work you're doing.
Thank you, and good luck.
We wish you well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to miss you.
Yes, we are.
I'm not going far. I think I'm only moving over there.
Okay.
I have, we had a public, member of the public who left, and maybe this is probably more suited for good of the city, but Heike Abeck had a request for a crosswalk at Pomona in Washington, and we'll get in touch with her. I just wanted to acknowledge the note was left here, and we'll get in touch with her and follow up.
Okay, good.
I think we all got at least the commissioners got a copy of some communication from Susan Moffett, I believe, about some interesting design treatments. And I'm going to try and at least make the presentation of that. So I recommend that to everybody. Looks really interesting.
I had a question about something that was brought up in public comment in the October meeting that I'm not sure if we really followed up on or not. Is this a good time to bring that up? It was about the speed bumps on Santa Fe near Marin School, and 2 people commented that they just create a lot of noise because people are going over them too fast and scraping the bottom. And one person suggested that they're not designed right, and another person suggested that we need more enforcement of the speed controls and not just rely on the bumps to do it. And I don't know if there's anything to say about that, or if we should agendize it at some point.
What I'm gonna do is I wanna check them. I mean, I drove over them and they're 15 mile per hour speed humps. I drove 25, it doesn't work. I mean, is there 15 mile per hour speed humps? And that's what we changed. We used to have a 25 mile per hour speed limit there, but we changed it to 15. So without knowing it, like an intentional school zone on that area, basically to 15 miles per hour.
But is there any signage about 15?
There is a signage.
Okay.
There is signage. Maybe we can add it on the pavement.
I probably should.
Yeah, or some kind of pavement treatment just to guide people into slowing down before they actually go over the bump.
15 mile per hour ahead.
Or the speed hump signs can have a 15 mile an hour advisory sign posted
We
on
do
them.
have the 15
Right,
mile per hour
right.
advisory right now.
Yeah. I mean, that's tricky because the 15 mile an hour at a school is technically only legal when children are going to or from school or during the lunch period. So the rest of the 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year long, the speed humps are overly aggressive when the speed limit reverts back to the normal 25.
So is this discussion getting too thorough and should we agendize it?
We could, yeah, maybe another minute or so of this, and then we can
Okay.
just agendize it and bring in give the members of that neighborhood a chance to participate. as
But the
well.
other thing I wanted to do is actually measure the height of the speed humps. And there might be it's obvious that there was some additional asphalt going on there because it's the same detail that we use for the other speed humps.
Right. It's hard to control sometimes exactly the height of the speed humps. Sometimes they come out taller than you want to. But it sounds like the design has come out to essentially 15 mile an hour design. And I know that that's been an issue. I kind of have a philosophical concern about traffic calming that's overly aggressive versus something that gets you to the right speed and then is non-punitive.
Elegant, I think is the
Yeah,
word you
thank you.
to use.
Yeah.
If
Okay.
it's overly aggressive, can you take them down physically? Is there a way to shave them down or whatever?
Okay, so there are some staff actions that you can take without bringing it back to us?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we can actually correct it without bringing it back to the commission. But I just want to report on that.
Okay.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, if the community wants to come talk to the commission, that's fine, but it sounds like it's something that can be handled by staff. Which maybe then we're ready to take a quick look at our future agenda items. Number 8, so talk about our 2015 work plan at the January meeting. Talking about discussion of traffic congestion issues and student safety initiatives. We're going to have anyone from the school attending for that one? Or any of the schools? Perfect, thank you. Solano Avenue Hillside traffic calming. It's going to be busy. In-city design concept for Solano San Pablo bus stop.
Maybe I'll move that for February.
Okay. Washington Avenue traffic calming. Is to talk about further calming or the status of the...
No, the status of the traffic calming that is going on right now, we have some preliminary design for traffic circles at Gateview in Washington and Cerrito in Washington, so.
Great, that sounds good. Brighton Avenue traffic calming is set for February.
Right, and that also for the middle school, I would like to invite, so you too, okay, great.
Very good. And electric vehicle charging stations. Presumably this is for charging in the public right-of-way?
Yeah,
On street?
so do you know more about that? I've been working with Claire, but she's working on an ordinance, you said.
Yeah, we're not very far along with it, but it's something that we do want to move up on our work list of something to have in the city of Albany that we're a little bit behind on, I think, compared to other communities.
Well, that depends on if it's in the public right-of-way, private property, whether it's public chargers or...
Right, there are a lot of different options, and right now, there really isn't, to my knowledge, any publicly available charging stations anywhere, whether it's at City Hall or at another city facility where we could do it on a pay-as-you-go basis for the driver.
Gotcha.
Or, establish some standards for future development to require charging stations, so on and so forth.
Great. Chargers and parking lots ought to definitely be something that we can tackle. Trying to deal with the on-street may be a bigger thing to.
Yeah, on-street for private use is a very complicated, it gets very complicated very quickly.
Nobody's officially done it yet until Berkeley may be doing it next week, which would make us the first. But,
Which location?
well, to launch a pilot program to allow private residential curbside charging, and it's got a million different constraints and considerations and is very complicated. I don't strongly advise taking it on until we've already tackled charging in parking lots and any number of other things that are easier and hopefully more helpful. And then monitoring a report for the Santa Fe Ramona-Pomona intersection to come back and talk about the effects of the striping changes there.
I'm going to see if I can do that actually in December.
Oh, okay.
But I don't want to monitor when it's raining, so I'm just going to do, it's going to be maybe a couple of weeks and then nothing, depending on the weather, so.
All right. Well,
Whatever I can do.
that sounds good. I'm sure people will be happy to get to that sooner than later. All right. Any last comments before we adjourn? Okay, thank you all.